Elliot, Michael, and Elron. Yeah. Well, good morning. I wanted to read to you something that Theodore Roosevelt said. When all is said, it is the mother, and the mother only, who is a better citizen than the soldier who fights for his country. The successful mother, the mother who does her part in rearing and training aright the boys and girls who are to be the generation of men and women of the next generation, is of more importance to the country if she would only realize it. A more honorable as well as a more important position than a man, the mother is the one supreme asset of national life. She is more important, by far, than the successful statesman, businessman, artist, or scientist. Happy Mother's Day. I know there are several categories of mothers. One, of course, is a woman who gives birth to a child and raises that child. There are mothers who have given birth to a child, but for whatever reason, another person raises that child. And then, of course, there's that category of people who are willing to step up and raise the child. So if you have played the role of mother in your mind and your life, would you please stand so that we can honor you? Yes. Thank you. Happy Mother's Day. As you leave today, we actually have a rose for each of you, so make sure you grab one as you're exiting. I know Mother's and Father's Day is always a little challenging for a minister because it's like there's some people who expect me to talk about mothers or fathers, and then there are others who want to, say, well, I'd rather just give a spiritual lesson. It's like, well, you can do both. And in of course, Unity's approach to the Bible, we recognize that all of the narrative stories of the Bible have embedded symbolism. All men represent the thinking nature, and all women represent the feeling nature. And when we look at the mothers in the Bible and talking about giving birth, we find that an idea, a thought, and a feeling come together and they give birth to something new. So in the symbolism of Jesus, you've got Mary. And Mary, any woman named Mary in the Bible represents love. And love at the really deep soul level. And so this love gave birth to a new idea of what God was all about. This Christ consciousness that not only was something above us in the heavens, it was in every cell of our body. Every one of us has that Christ consciousness within us. And then, of course, Mary Magdalene witnesses the resurrection of Jesus. And here again, a whole new level of looking, at God and what God means to us. But when we look at our mothers in our life, and like I said, depending upon if it's your birth mother or whatever, what a mother does is she's our first life coach. She's the one who shows us how to interact with other people, how to do things right and do things wrong. And boy, when you look at the spectrum of the expression of motherhood, you either learn through an expression that is pleasant or unpleasant. Someone who is a good role model and someone who shows you how not to be. And as we observe the world around us, that's one of the key questions, is what do we want to identify ourselves with? In my own mind, it's like, okay, that's not me. So who do I want to be, and who do I want to express? Many people wish that we could just get along with everybody. Can't we all just get along? But it's not that way always, is it? And sometimes people can be annoying. They can be behaving not according to my preferences. And so what do we do with this? And then you get the person who you think has been sent by God into your life to teach you unconditional love. That challenge of how am I possibly going to communicate with this person? How can I get along with this person? In Japan, there is this little ritual they do when a child becomes of a certain age that they can understand. It's called the pillow education, and the idea is you got the four corners of the pillow. And the mother sits the child down at the one corner, and instructs the child to say, "I'm right and you're wrong." And then she moves the child to the next corner and says, "I'm wrong and you're right." And then to the third corner, and the child says, "I'm wrong and you're wrong." And then she puts the child on the fourth corner and says, "Maybe I'm partially right and maybe you're partially right." And it's a good lesson that sometimes we're working on assumptions that aren't quite true or aren't well informed. In the Gospel of Matthew, 5th chapter, 25th verse, Jesus talks about agreeing with your adversary quickly. There's an importance to recognizing that we need to have a conversation, make sure that we're working from the same set of facts, the same set of information. And in the Bible story, what Jesus is saying is when you're on your way to the court, agree with your adversary quickly, the person who you've got disagreement with. And it's better off if you can work it out yourself, because when you go to the courts, believe it or not, back 2,000 years ago, they had corrupt judges. And if the judge figured out that you had some wealth in your family, regardless of if you were right or wrong or was on the right side of the law or not, they'd throw you in prison for ransom, make your family come and ransom you out by giving money to the judge. So his point was agree with your adversary quickly, or you might find yourself in a much deeper mess than just this disagreement that you've got with this person. On April 29th, 1992, a man named Reginald Denny is a truck driver, and he was driving a truck, like a semi-style truck, but it was a big dump truck full of sand. And he didn't have a radio in his truck, and he's just kind of tooling along, doing what he would do regularly. He was driving this truck of sand to this manufacturing plant in Inglewood. What he didn't realize was that at the same time, 4 police officers had been acquitted of the beating of Rodney King. And suddenly, a protest and then a riot broke out along Florence Avenue. And here, Reginald was just driving along Florence Avenue, and up above were news helicopters with cameras. And Reginald gets to a corner, and all of a sudden, somebody throws a rock at his windshield, and climbs up on the truck, and they pull him out, and they're just beating him. 4 different people were beating him over a period of about 5 minutes, and the news chopper was catching all of this on camera. And the only thing that saved his life is there was another truck driver who was also getting a little bit beaten, but he saw that, Reginald, first he had actually passed out, and then he came to, and some other people were then kicking him in the head and all of that. So the other truck driver got Reginald up into his truck and drove his truck to this hospital that was nearby. And the doctor said, that Denny's skull was broken in so many places they couldn't count it. And he emerged from this whole situation with some nerve damage. One lost part of his eyesight and one of his eyes. And because all of this was on camera, they were able to identify the people who had attacked him. There were 4 men. One was like 18, and the oldest was like 33. And they had a trial, and Reginald Denny was there. And at one point, during they took a recess, Reginald Denny walked up to the mothers of 2 of the men who were being tried. And he said, "Can I shake your hand?" And I know the one woman, let's see, I've got her name written down here, Georgiana Williams, stood up and looked at him and said to him, "I love you." And Reginald Denny said, "I love you too." And he hugged them and all of that. And he made it clear to them that he recognized he was just a victim of circumstances, as were their sons. 20 years later, in 2012, Reginald Denny was interviewed on TV. And he was asked about this, and he's like, "It's okay. I mean, I forgave them. I know that they didn't have anything against me personally. They were just venting their rage at the time." And the interviewer was just astonished. Because he took a lot of rehabilitation so he could even go back to his job of driving a truck. But it was a good lesson. In the Gospel of Luke, 23rd chapter, 34th verse, Jesus is nailed to the cross. He's being executed by the Roman Empire for causing problems during the Holy Week, or actually it was the Passover week. And he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So you have someone in your life that you don't think you can forgive. See, the problem is when you don't forgive someone, you are tying yourself emotionally to that person. You are surrendering your power. You're surrendering your feelings to that other person. Some of you are old enough to remember the comics Buddy Hackett. I remember seeing him interviewed, I think it was on Johnny Carson one night. Now I'm really setting my age, right? And Buddy was talking about how his father had this resentment about this certain person, just that sense of, can't forgive that person and all that. And he says, and one time, his father went to a place where there was a party, and he saw the person who he resented dancing and having a grand old time. And he just started feeling angry, and then it hit him. Wait a minute here. He doesn't even have any inkling of what I'm feeling about him, and I'm here miserable. What's wrong with this picture? And he realized, I need to forgive. I need to let this situation go. A priest wrote a memoir when he reached age 70. Catholic priest. He talked about when he was ordained, he was absolutely sure that he was going to go out and change the world. He said about 10 years later, he readjusted his goal to, if I can make a positive difference in 100 people's lives, I'll be happy. And then he said here at age 70, when he was working on this memoir, he said, I realized that what really mattered was the fact that I was able to change myself. There's an old Scottish saying that says, angels fly because they take themselves lightly. Let me read you a prayer by that prolific writer, Anonymous. God, here is my mind. I spread it out before thee. Forgive thou its foolishness and ignorance with thy wisdom. Here is my life. I offer it to thee. Forgive thou its contrariness to thee. Here is my heart. It is thine only. Forgive thou its restlessness and dissatisfaction. Forgive its discouragements. Forgive its resentments. Forgive its loves. Forgive its hates. Forgive its hopes, its fears. Here is my body. I offer it to thee. Forgive thou its imperfections with thy perfection. Forgive me altogether with thyself. Give for myself thyself. Amen. Two things jump out at me in reading the poem. One is that sense that you need to pray to a God outside of yourself. There's nothing wrong with praying to a God outside of yourself as long as you recognize that there's a God within yourself too. God is everywhere, in every cell of the body. And one of our big challenges is just allowing our ego to get out of the way to allow that divine energy to pour forth as love, as wisdom, as kindness, as compassion. But the second thing that really jumps out at me as you go through is he's not asking, or whoever wrote this prayer, it wasn't asking to change anybody else, just themselves. So rather than trying to change others, recognize that everyone is doing the best that they can with the information they have at that moment. They're doing the best they can with what they've experienced in their life to that moment. It's not what happens to us, it's how we react to what happens to us. No, it doesn't change what happened. We can change the way we perceive what happened, but the secret is forgiveness, being willing to forgive, to let go. And I have found it's much more effective if the other person doesn't know about it. There's something very sanctimonious of like, you really ticked me off, I'm going to forgive you. Doesn't really work very well, does it? Oh, you lucky person, I have forgiven you. Well, if we're spiritual beings having a human experience, recognize that every spiritual being that comes into your life is there to help bring out the best in you. We bring out the best in each other. And of course, there's the main question, am I coming from love or am I coming from fear? You know, the two polar opposites. And remember, it's not love and hate. Hate is a reaction to fear. So when you see people expressing hate, what is it that they're fearing? I've heard people lament, well, why are there disagreeable people here? It's because we're here to bring out the best in each other, to test the limits of our unconditional love. Funny, isn't it? Unconditional love is very nice to talk about, but is it something you express, or I express for that matter? Yeah, it seems like most of the time I've got some sort of conditions attached. So, dolphins and orcas in the ocean, of course orcas are also known as killer whales, they don't get along. They try to avoid each other. But something remarkable happens when an orca whale is pregnant and about to give birth. Dolphins gather with the orca and get underneath the orca and hold the orca up so that the orca can breathe. You know, both orcas and dolphins, need to come to the surface occasionally to breathe. And as you can imagine, an orca whale in labor needs some help, holding up. And then when the calf is birthed, other dolphins gather and bring that calf up to the air, up to the surface of the water so it can breathe. And then it's back to the mother for nourishment. It's a remarkable display for people who study this kind of stuff. They come together. It's like a gift of friendship between two species that don't seem to get along under any other circumstances. Or could it also just be divine order, the proper sequence of events that allow the best outcome to happen? Confucius said, when you see a good man, think of emulating him. When you see a bad man, examine your own heart. And of course, in unity, at the end of each service, we do a blessing for our children. So I behold the Christ in you. I behold the divinity in you. I behold that you have given me the gift of coming into my life and annoying the crap out of me. And just being willing to step back and say, God, show me the good in this. Why are my buttons being pushed here? And truly being grateful that this person helped expose to me something that I was blind to, or something that maybe I wasn't blind to but just didn't want to deal with. So we recognize at those moments, can we open our mind to the divine mind and get that divine idea, that answer to our prayer? It's like, oh, you're right, this person reminds me of, and that allows it to come to the surface to say, okay, you made this judgment about this when you were 6. Is this the way you want to approach life from this point forward? And of course the answer is no, I don't. And you let it go. And you've had a healing. You've been born again. And I'm serious about that. Part of the aspect is that you're born again and again and again. You've had a new attitude birthed. That's what being born again is all about. It's not a one-time occasion. Hopefully it happens every day in your life. So, we started out talking about Myrtle Fillmore. And for those of you who don't know, Charles and Myrtle founded the Unity Movement back in the 1880s. Myrtle was able to heal herself from tuberculosis when there was no medical cure by meditating and praying to do it. And Charles was kind of like, hey, we need to learn more about this and bring this to other people. He made a habit, after studying this stuff for about 10 years, that every evening, and this, of course, was before radio and before TV, how did we possibly do what we did back then? Where they'd sit around and read. You see, he would devote 20 minutes every evening to just kind of look at the day and recognize, okay, who do I need to forgive? And just letting go of those annoyances, and also recognizing where he needed to forgive himself for how he acted in that particular day. Perhaps a better word than forgiveness is release. And in the Lord's Prayer, where it says, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, or forgive us our trespasses as we forgive our trespasses. I know George Lambs and Rocco Errico, who've really looked at the original manuscripts and all, say actually a better way of saying it as a, please help me untie my emotional attachment to this, just as I hope other people will untie their emotional attachment to me. Okay, Duncan, let's go ahead and put up this week's takeaways. So, how do we handle difficult people? Well, of course, as you probably figured out, the way you handle difficult people is recognize that you're the one who's making it difficult. So who is right and who is wrong? Am I surrendering my power? The only person I can truly control is myself. Ask, show me the good in this. And am I ready to give birth to a new attitude? And I'm willing to embrace the realization, the healing that I've had, that moment when I have been born again to new consciousness, new awareness of my divine purpose in life. And like I said, I believe that we're all put here together because we're here to bring out the best in each other. It's so hard, I know, for myself and probably for you to really see that good in myself, especially a recovering perfectionist like me. But if someone else can say, wow, great job, good job, thank you, it helps remind me of who I am. I've got a video for you, which I thought was perfect for this lesson. It's about a mother who had to handle a difficult person.